I used to yell at my dad for being late, until I saw why his hands were always bleeding when he came home. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm 26 now, but this story takes me back to when I was 16, the kind of age where you think your parents just don't get it. We lived in a small industrial town in Ohio, where the air always smelled faintly of iron and rain. Dad worked at the steel plant on the edge of town, the one with the flickering lights and the endless hum that never really stopped, even at midnight. Every evening, I'd sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, waiting for the sound of his old motorbike. He was always late, always. Dinner would get cold, Mum would sigh, and I'd mutter under my breath, "He doesn't care about us." I was angry, impatient, full of that teenage arrogance that makes you think you know everything about sacrifice. When he finally came home, I'd roll my eyes at how dirty he looked. Grease-stained shirt, cracked hands, dust in his hair. "Can't you be on time for once?" I'd snap. He never yelled back, just smiled, tired but gentle, and said, "Sorry, champ." Got caught up again. I hated that answer. Caught up again. Like that explained everything. But that night, the night everything changed, he didn't come home at all. Dinner sat untouched. Mum kept glancing at the clock, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. Midnight came and went. When his bike finally pulled into the driveway at 1:30 a.m., I was already rehearsing what I'd say. I stormed toward him before he could even step inside. "Where were you?" "You don't even try anymore," I shouted. He froze, eyes tired, lips trembling. He opened his mouth to speak, then looked down, and that's when I saw it. His hands, wrapped in old bandages, soaked through with blood. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say. He tried to hide them. When he saw my eyes go wide, he shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and forced a weak smile. "Just a little accident at work," he said. "Nothing to worry about." But I couldn't look away. The bandages were dark, not just from grease or dirt, but from something thicker, heavier, blood. I remember my voice shaking when I said, "That's not nothing, Dad. What happened?" He sighed, took off his jacket, and finally sat down at the table. Mom moved quietly behind him, brought the first aid kit, and I noticed she didn't look surprised. She just looked tired, like this wasn't the first time. He spoke slowly, carefully, like each word had to be earned. "There was an accident with one of the presses. The safety lever jammed again. The new kid froze up when the machine started slipping. I just reacted." He paused, got his hand out. Mine didn't make it out in time. I felt the room tilt. He said it so casually, like losing part of your hand was just another Tuesday. You got hurt saving someone else?" I asked. He shrugged. "He's got a wife. A baby on the way. What was I supposed to do?" Mum started cleaning the wounds gently, her hands trembling. When she unwrapped the bandages, I saw the truth. His palm was torn open, deep cuts across his fingers, skin raw and blistered. "Why didn't you go to the hospital?" I said, choking on my own words. He smiled again, that same quiet, selfless smile I used to hate. "Because if I leave, they dock my pay, and we can't afford another short month, son." That line hit me harder than anything. He wasn't late because he didn't care. He was late because he was out there bleeding, earning the right for us to eat warm food under a roof that didn't leak. I excused myself, went to my room, and just sat there, staring at my clean hands. Hands that never had to lift anything heavier than a school bag, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt ashamed. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hands, those torn, shaking hands, holding a sandwich like it weighed a ton. By midnight, the house was quiet. Mum had fallen asleep on the couch, TV still humming faintly. Dad's boots were by the door, laces still wet from the rain. And before I could stop myself, I slipped my hoodie on, grabbed my bike, and followed the sound of his old Chevy as it rumbled down the road. It took me 15 minutes to reach the factory, a long, grey building surrounded by rust and fog. No lights, no windows, just noise. Metal clanging, steam hissing, and the steady rhythm of machines pounding like heartbeats. I hid behind the fence and watched through a crack. Rows of men worked under flickering lights, faces tired, shirts soaked with sweat. And there, in the far corner, was Dad. He moved slower than the rest, but every time a machine jammed, he was the first one to step forward. He used his bandaged hand like it didn't even hurt, adjusting levers, tightening bolts, keeping everything running. At one point, another worker, maybe that new kid he mentioned, dropped a tool and froze as the press started slipping again. Without hesitation, Dad reached over with his injured hand and pulled him back. Same exact move that got him hurt before. Same reflex. Same kind of heart that never learns how to protect itself. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. I used to think my dad was just tired, just some guy who came home too late to care. But watching him there, under that cold, rattling light, saving people who didn't even notice his pain, I realized he wasn't weak. He was stronger than anyone I knew. He was carrying the kind of pain that doesn't show up in X-rays, the kind that eats at you quietly while you keep going anyway. When the shift ended, I biked home before he saw me. He came in an hour later, boots heavy, hands trembling, face pale. He didn't notice me awake on the couch. He just kissed Mom's forehead, poured himself a glass of water, and sat in silence, staring at the floor like it was the only thing holding him together. That night, I promised myself something. I wouldn't let him keep carrying it alone. The next morning, I made breakfast before he woke up. Not the usual burnt toast and cereal. Real breakfast. Eggs, coffee, the kind he used to make for me when I was little. When he walked in, he looked confused, like he'd stepped into the wrong house. "Morning," I said. He blinked. "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. I pushed the plate toward him. "Eat." He hesitated, then sat down. His hands trembled a little when he picked up the fork. The cuts were still raw, the bandages darker now. And before I could lose my nerve, I said it. "I saw you last night." He froze, didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at me like I'd spoken a language he'd forgotten. "At the factory," I continued. "I followed you." For a second, he said nothing. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed to pull the air out of the room. "Ethan," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have done that." "Why not?" My throat tightened. "Because then I'd see how hard you work. Because I'd see what you've been hiding from us." His jaw clenched. "It's not your burden." "Then whose is it?" I snapped. "You nearly lost your hand. You can't even grip a cup without wincing. And you still went back there. For what? For us? For me?" He looked down, then said something I'll never forget. "Because that's what fathers do. We don't stop when it hurts. We stop when they don't need us anymore." I didn't realize I was crying until the coffee rippled from the drops hitting the surface. He reached across the table with his shaking hand and wiped my cheek. And that tiny trembling gesture broke me more than any words could. That day, after he left for work, I made my own decision. I called the hospital. I called his manager. I called everyone I could until someone listened. By that evening, he was scheduled for a full medical evaluation and a few weeks off, paid leave. When I told him, he was angry at first, said he didn't need help. But when he saw the look in my eyes, the same look he used to have when I'd scraped my knees as a kid, he just nodded, quiet, tired, grateful. That night we sat on the porch together, no words, just the sound of crickets and the faint smell of grease still on his hands. For the first time he didn't hide the pain. And for the first time, I didn't pretend not to see it. Sometimes, love isn't about saying thank you. It's about finally seeing the people who've been bleeding for you in silence, and choosing to stand beside them instead of on their shoulders.